And this is the scariest part because we're going down into the basement. And you'll see why that's scary in a minute. Originally would have served a couple of different purposes. When it was first built by James Barry, the basement would have been servants' quarters and also where a lot of the work of the staff would have been done. This was, I would imagine, used originally as a fuel store for either coal or turf or maybe wood. There's that noise again. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. So to me, this part of the house feels quite a lot older than the other part, and that would account for the name of this house. So as I've said already, the house is called Villa Nuova, which means new villa or new house. So presumably there was an older house here. To the outside of the house now and paying some more attention to these outbuildings. Most of these in more recent history have been reused for largely agricultural purposes, either the storage of hay. We know that this one, for example, which you can't really make out, it's roofless and very overgrown now, but that within the last 15 years had been used to store up to 100 bales of hay. And these two had been largely used for the storage of agricultural equipment. But we know that their purpose originally had served mostly to do with horses. So this building here, which you may not be able to make out, and I can't really get very close to, was most likely a carriage house. You can just about make out the arch of that door. And this one here would probably have been used as a stable, which you can probably see there. It's a double floor building, solid stone, similar to the house, although probably more crudely constructed. And we know that equestrianism was very important to the original owner of this house and builder, Dr. James Barry, who has spoken a lot about. There's records of him in the news archives of being a very proud and passionate horseman. He had a horse partake in races at Derrynane. The horse, incidentally, was called Asclepius, who was the Roman god of medicine and healing. So we know that he was very passionate about horses. And there's also a record of a horse being taken from here, presumably one of these buildings, on Shrove Tuesday, so February 12th in 1867, as part of the Fenian Rising. So the Fenians from Valencia, who were being led at the time by a man called J.J. O'Connor, who had returned from America, having been wounded in the American Civil War, launched an attack. They met up with Fenians from Filemore and from Valencia, and the Fenians from this part of the Évora Peninsula, which is called Over the Water, and they launched an attack on the Kells Coast Guard station. And there's also records of them heading back towards this area after the attack and taking the horse from Dr. Barry, presumably again from one of these buildings, so that their leader J.J. O'Connor could make his escape, because he wasn't physically as capable as the rest of the men because of his injuries he'd sustained in America. So like when you put these buildings into that sort of historical context, it becomes very real. They look like ruins today. And in some ways, I suppose they are ruins. But when you think about how important these buildings were, not just to Dr. Barry, but to a lot of the people in the area and to the local history, like that's an incredibly important part of local history that this building has served. And really today, it's just kind of forgotten, or largely forgotten, not completely. This here is the milking parlour, or was the milking parlour. It was used, well, as the name would indicate, for milking animals. You can still see here some of the, I don't know what you would call them, sections where the cattle would have been tied up. In fact, the the bolts are still mounted to the wall where the animals would have been tied up to. And then here you can see, presumably these were for filling the milk jugs. It's long seized up. And then if you come through this door here, there's another kind of like secret courtyard. Although I'm sure it wasn't originally intended as a courtyard, but more sort of derelict outbuildings, which were probably used more recently for the storage of animal feed. I think that one was used for the storage of wood usually. These are not particularly old, the buildings out here, but this one is quite old. Obviously this served an important function for the building when it was built. So this is the before. We plan on clearing some of the overgrowth from the other outbuildings later today. So we'll do an after video and keep you posted there. So I did a quick video yesterday about the outbuildings here, the carriage house and the stables and stuff like that. And you probably couldn't see much of it because, as you can see now, it's completely overgrown. So today we're going to do a quick before and after video. We're going to try and strip back some of the brambles and the overgrowth to reveal these buildings. So stay tuned and let us know what you think. So I'll do a quick update here. We just tried the time-lapse for the clearance of the outbuildings here, the clearing away the undergrowth or all the shrubbery and stuff like that. And you can probably see it here. Don't mind that noise, that's a Gautier's drone. So we've made really good headway. We've managed to clear away most of the ivy and brambles and everything else that was growing on it. But unfortunately, some of these buildings seem to be in much worse condition than we'd originally anticipated. This is the first time we've actually been able to see this one. And you can see here, that wall is about to come down. I'll get as close as is safe. But yeah, I'm not sure how much of that you can make out, but it's really in bad condition that it's completely offset the front of the wall above the lintel there. So that's not ideal. But here you can get a much better sense of the arch of what was once the carriage house, which we really want to preserve. And I'm desperate to know what you all think about how is best to stop that from collapse, because I think it's absolutely stunning. This other door in the carriage house is really close to almost total collapse. You can see there We actually had some stones fall out of that while we were clearing the ivy, so we just left it because A, we don't want this to collapse and lose the building, but also we don't want to die in the process of clearing this. So all in all, a productive morning's work, but some more work to do, which is often the case with these houses. It's a bit of a dance of one step forward and two steps back. But we'll get there in the end. This is a quick follow-up from yesterday's video. As you can see, we propped that wall that we thought was at danger of collapse, but I wanted to spend some time just sort of going over these two buildings here and getting your thoughts on what they might have been. So as I said yesterday, my guess was that this was probably the carriage house, and this might have been a stable or maybe dwelling for the coachman or something like that. I'm not going to go in too deep here because it's, as you can see, not incredibly stable. In fact, it's incredibly unstable. But you can see here that this was once an entrance into that other outbuilding, whatever it was. There's an old bicycle left behind. But there's also weird details that you wouldn't necessarily expect to find in a stable, like this sash window here. It was obviously a two-story building as well, because you can see the evidence where that floor was. And it had at one point, if you can see there, a fireplace, bizarrely enough. So again, not something you would typically expect to find in a stable or a carriage house. And then if we go through here, so again, this is that arch that we fear is probably not structurally too sound, so we're going to try and brace that. But if I can sort of scramble over these branches, nearly brained myself. We can take a look inside here and get a sense of the scale of this building. It is actually a very, very large building. You could easily accommodate 2 stories in here, 2 floors. There's the old stairs. I'm not sure where that would have been. And this is where the floor joists would have sat into the wall. This wall here is obviously a later addition where it was used for housing livestock. I'm not sure what exactly. I think it was probably cattle or sheep. And the roof looks to have been done at some point in more recent history, maybe the last 40, 50 years, I would say. The beams actually don't look in terrible shape at all. But there's obviously been some issues here where a tree has fallen on the outbuilding next door and collapsed, or half collapsed this wall, so that needs to be looked at. This also is not a great sign. That's, I don't know if you can see that, I'll zoom in. That's the bottom of one of the sides of the arch that needs repair quite badly, actually. I'd never noticed that before. So we just wanted to do this follow-up to give you a look at the inside of the building, and also to ask what you think these buildings might have been used for. As I said, we're only guessing here that these were stables and carriage houses. We're not historians or architects, so if anybody can tell us in more detail what they might have been used for, we'd love to hear from you. Anyway, thanks for following. Stay tuned and talk to you all soon. So you remember from a previous video when I was talking about the basement and the issue that we had with water pooling in this part of the building. So when we started to pull back all of this overgrowth, we found that there was this retaining wall. Below me here is the basement level. So what we're trying to do now is take back all of the layers of dirt and brambles and old slate and whatever else has been dumped in here, so that we can prop this and make it secure for the next whatever 20, 30, 40, 50 years.